Here we go. Had to do it. Gonna rank all 11 Star Wars movies. My thoughts, my opinions. This is Six Scale Economist, and it starts right now.
Working on zombie apocalypse.
What's going on, YouTube? For those of you who haven't been to my channel before, this is Six Scale Economist, where I talk about all things Star Wars and Marvel hot toys. But this video, we're going to be talking about my rankings for all 11 Star Wars theatrical movies that we have had. And jumping right into it, let's talk about the first one on the list. This goes in no particular order. We're talking first about Return of the Jedi.
Luke, help me take this mask off.
But you'll die.
Overall, original trilogy, obviously that's where my heart is. This is obviously the best three films of the entire Star Wars saga. This one, weakest of the three for me. I really enjoyed everything on Tatooine going on with Jabba, but I thought that the pacing of the movie wasn't spectacular, and I wasn't really about everything that was going on in Endor. I thought it was fun to watch, and it's definitely a very enjoyable movie. But everything going on in Endor wasn't that great, and everything going up, in space, trying to beat the Death Star and destroy this second Death Star, I thought was pretty cool, but kind of just something we had seen before. But it was all made up for everything that happened in the character arc with Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, and the Emperor in that throne room. That is what carried this movie for me, and really, sealed this original trilogy as some of the best films of all time. So overall, I really like this movie. Not my favorite Star Wars movie, but certainly deserves a solid A. Jumping into the next one on the list, we have the first movie that we had from the sequels in The Force Awakens. Super pumped for this movie. Whole new story. Nothing like the prequels, and it's gonna be something fresh, something new. I like the casting they did for this movie. Give it us Daisy Ridley, John Boyega. Adam Driver, and so I thought this movie had a lot going for it, Oscar Isaac, and it was kind of just boring. It was basically the same plot as A New Hope. There's another Death Star. They actually even made a joke in the movie where Harrison Ford says so, or someone, I don't remember who it was in the movie, someone said so, basically it's another Death Star. It was fine. They played it safe. I guess it was kind of interesting. I thought they had a lot that they could build off of this movie. And it seemed promising, but overall it was a pretty boring movie, and just didn't have that much for me. So it's definitely not the worst Star Wars movie that they've done, but this one's probably going to have to be a C for me. All right, following up, we have Episode 8, The Last Jedi. Again, they're trying to build off of, The Force Awakens. I thought they had some interesting things going for it, but they just changed the director, and it wasn't J.J. Abrams anymore, and then, all of a sudden now we just have this movie that was basically the plot of this movie was the First Order chasing the Resistance and firing these pointless missiles, and it was kind of just boring, and there was no sense of urgency. But I thought this movie had some cool moments. That whole scene on the casino planet with John Boyega was awful. Didn't like any of that.
Don't do this. No.
And they tried to do a love story, whatever. I wasn't really into it, but I thought this movie had a lot of redeeming parts to it. One, that scene where they fly, the Resistance flies the ship through the First Order thing, do that light speed thing, that was so sick, so unique, something we hadn't seen before in any other Star Wars movie. It's definitely a loophole though, because it's kind of why don't they just always do that, or why don't they just put something on autopilot and put 1 minute, in 1 minute this ship's gonna go to light speed, and then just jump off the plane and just keep doing that, and just keep suiciding all of their ships and don't even have anybody on it and just fly them through it. So it definitely opens up a big loophole in Star Wars. But overall, that was a really cool scene, and everything on the final scene with Luke Skywalker force projecting and facing Adam Driver, I thought that was really cool. Definitely think they should have killed Finn at the end of that movie with John Boyega, but they didn't because it's Disney and it's a kid's film, and I guess they have to just keep the main characters because all the kids are going to be sad if the main characters die. But I thought that would have been really cool if they did that. Overall, this movie gets a lot of hate. I think a lot of it's deserved, but I don't think it's as bad as people say. It's definitely not my least favorite Star Wars movie again, and I think it falls right in the column as right in the same row as The Force Awakens. It's going to be a C for me on that one. All right, we got another original trilogy movie, the first Star Wars movie. This is where it all started. Star Wars: New Hope, or better known as Star Wars. Absolutely love this movie. They kept it simple. This was George Lucas, when his brain was correct and he was making great movies. If you think about the movie, it's really just pretty simple. You have a protagonist in Luke Skywalker. You have an antagonist in Darth Vader. You have a damsel in distress in Leia. You have an old wise Herman in Obi-Wan Kenobi, and you have like a rogue smuggler, like smuggy type of guy who has a lot of charisma in Han Solo. It's basically like the main characters that you would think in like any like the film dating back 500 years ago, and like any Shakespeare like novel, like they kept it very simple, and that's all they really needed to do. And the scenes were great, the character development was fantastic, the pacing was great. I know some people might say that this movie is like a little bit boring in spots. I don't think so at all. You also have like C-3PO and R2-D2. C-3PO, like a great comic relief where it really hits. And overall, it's just a fantastic movie, enjoyable, like all the way through. The character development really is where this movie shines. This is how a movie is supposed to be done. This is like one of the best Star Wars movies and one of the best films in my opinion of all time. It's just so well done. Everything about this movie, I love it. Definitely one of my favorite Star Wars movies, and definitely is going to have to be an S for me. For every great Star Wars movie, there's a bad Star Wars movie. Fourth, Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. This one it's tough. Again, there was a lot of build up for this movie, coming out in 1999. We hadn't seen a Star Wars movie since 1983. Had all these new characters. There was so much anticipation and so much excitement for this movie, but it just fell short. It's too long. There's too many boring scenes within the movie. The character development is terrible in this movie. You don't really get to learn like that much about Qui-Gon. He's kind of just like this boring guy. Darth Maul, he looks amazing and like looks sick, and you really want to know like more about him and where he comes from. Like they basically tell you none of that in this movie. Thankfully, they capture all of that in the Clone Wars, and that's fantastic. If you haven't seen the Clone Wars, go watch Clone Wars. I know it's a lot to invest in, but that's a great series where you get to learn a lot more about some of these characters. But overall, the movie just fell short in a lot of spots. Casting Anakin, showing Anakin as a kid was like kind of lame. Like didn't really like it. I think they could have just skipped that entire part. If you really think about Phantom Menace in general, they probably could have just skipped that entire movie and just started off at the beginning of Attack of the Clones when Anakin is like already training, and then maybe just give us like a 10-minute like throwback to tell us where Anakin came from and everything. But like overall, this movie was just slow. And then at the end, they just got too crazy. There's actually an interview with a scene from the making of Phantom Menace where George Lucas says, "I may have gone too far in a couple of spots." You think he had 4 different sequences going on in the final act of the movie, right? You had the battle on Naboo with the Gungans versus the droids, which was like cool to watch, I guess, not that interesting. You had like Anakin doing his thing in space, which again like was kind of boring, kind of trying to show like synonyms and parallels to like the Death Star run. Didn't really like it. And then you have like the senators like trying to like find like the Gungan people, or not the Gungan, those like people that look like really weird and whatever, look like fish. And then you have Anakin, and then you have Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon versus Darth Maul. That scene is awesome. I know it's super choreographed. I really enjoyed it though. I thought that it didn't have as much like emphasis and feel to it as it probably could have, but overall it was great. It was great to see Darth Maul fight. And that was probably the only redeeming factor of the overall movie. Also not my least favorite Star Wars movie, but also going to have to be a C for me. Not the worst, but pretty close to it. Alright, jumping into the next one. The first spin-off movie, Disney, Rogue One, a Star Wars story. This movie was fantastic. I absolutely love this movie. The characters in this movie are great. You have Jyn Erso. The plot is interesting with Galen Erso. He's like the dude who like knows how to create the Death Star. You have the antagonist in Director Krennic, which is an awesome antagonist. He's great. He's so similar to Grand Moff Tarkin. You can tell that he's like not totally the most supreme bad guy. Like he has people who are above him, and it's great to see him like showing so much authority in some scenes and being such a badass in some scenes, but then also just like totally being like spit on by Grand Moff Tarkin and Darth Vader. So I love that character, and I love the whole progression of the movie. K2SO was an excellent comic relief. It was basically the opposite of what they did with C-3PO, where C-3PO is kind of like the dumb, silly comic relief, whereas K2SO is like the smart, sarcastic, witty version. It worked so well. The pacing of this movie is fantastic. The action scenes are great. Everything is gripping. You really feel like you're involved in this movie. Disney needs to do more spin-offs like this. Just give us an original story with original cast and go wild with it. I absolutely love this movie. This movie is actually going to be in the S tier for me. Jumping into the next one, we have Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. This movie is awful. There's no way around it. The Phantom Menace at least grew on me a little bit as I got older, kind of. The Attack of the Clones, there's just nothing redeeming about this movie. This movie is too slow. Anakin's depiction, like being like this whiny, like dude who's like supposed to be like the friend and brother of Obi-Wan, like we heard in A New Hope when Obi-Wan was reflecting, but it just comes off as he's just whiny and complains, and he's just not interesting.
I'm deeply sorry, Master.
And it's just like hard to like watch him on screen. The dialogue is awful in this movie. They tried to do like a romance thing with him and Padme and Natalie Portman. It just didn't work. The Camino scene was cool. It was cool to see like this like clone army being built, and like you start to hear like, oh, there's this backstory, like who commissioned this clone army to be built. And it's like, oh, this dude named Sifo Dyas who like did it like 10 years ago, and like, wow, that was like super interesting. Like I wanted to learn more about that. Like, oh, who is that? Like, what happened with this? And then they just don't explore that at all. It's like, oh, okay, I guess the movie's over, and none of that really mattered. They go into that in the Clone Wars, but this movie shouldn't need to be able to have shouldn't need like a TV series to supplement like a pretty important plot point of this movie. And then you get to like the battle on Geonosis. I guess it was cool to see like the Jedi throw down. Like it was cool to watch. And then you have like this final act where you have Obi-Wan and Anakin fighting Count Dooku. It's boring. It's weird. They do like these weird face shots where they have like the lightsabers in front of them. It wasn't really that enticing. You didn't really feel anything with it. And you had like that whole factory scene right before they got to Geonosis, which apparently George Lucas wrote that scene on the way to like filming for like when they were like filming the movie, like in the car, like in its shows. Overall, this movie was just poorly done, too slow, not interesting, and definitely my least favorite Star Wars movie of the entire saga. It's going to be a D for me. Jumping into the next one, we have Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. I love this movie. The sequels suck. The prequels suck, the first two, but this movie is fantastic. When I grew up as a kid, I grew up with the prequels. This was by far my favorite movie. I saw it in theaters, immediately got the DVD, went to Target, got it for $26 the day it came out. I thought that George Lucas really saved the prequels with this movie. I don't know if he saved it, but he at least, didn't get as much criticism. It starts off, it has action-packed, and the pacing is great in this movie. You have scenes where there's a lot of action, and, it's a lot to take in, and then you kind of have more lull moments where you can kind of take it all in and digest what just happened and try and think about it. And then as it comes right back up to another action scene, you have a ton of conflict. In Anakin becoming Darth Vader, you have like so many different like side things going on, but overall that is like the overarching theme of the movie. And to see Anakin become dark and do those terrible things like killing younglings and like going to the Jedi Temple, like I thought that was like really cool, and it all built up to that final act where you had Yoda facing Emperor and Obi-Wan facing Anakin on Mustafar, and it was just fantastic. I love this movie, and it's aged so well. There's like so many pop culture memes with this movie, and I've really just come to like, I love that movie as a kid, and I still love it today. And contrary to probably a lot of people's opinion, this one is going to be an S for me. This is one of my favorite Star Wars movies. I love that movie. Second spin-off that Disney did, Solo, A Star Wars Story. This movie got really bad reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. I actually think that it was a little bit undeserving.
Thought we were in trouble there for a second, but it's fine. We're fine.
I thought that this movie, like, while like the plot like wasn't that interesting, like there really wasn't much to it. It was kind of just like its own thing. The movie was basically like a time heist, bank heist movie where there's no like real antagonists in the movie. They just basically have like something that they have to complete in X amount of time, and it's a fun movie to watch. There's not that much that you're gonna take away from this movie. You sit down, you watch it. It's like a fun 2 hours or whatever. You kind of get to see like Han Solo's backstory and stuff, which I didn't really care as much about. Like if this was just their own thing and all these people had different names, I thought it would have been fine. Like Childish Gambino was great in this movie. Woody Harrelson was great in this movie. They did a great job casting. And overall, it's just like a fun movie to watch. I don't think it really fits into the Star Wars realm that much. It doesn't really add much to like any of the stories or anything, but it's a fun movie that I've seen a couple of times. I'll probably watch it a few more times. Like, I'm always down to watch this movie, you know, as like just like a fun movie. And it's really middle of the pack for me, on that one. How do you wrap up all the sequels? You give us Star Wars Rise of Skywalker Episode 9. How can you wrap up a bad trilogy of movie? In my opinion, they give us the worst of the sequels. This movie has way too much going on. You can tell that it was J.J. Abrams trying to pick back up the sequels and finish it, you know, and he's kind of trying to do like what he was trying to start in The Force Awakens with like giving Rey her backstory that was just totally destroyed in Episode 8, and like he's trying to put the puzzle pieces together and kind of like rush things together, and so we're all trying to figure out who Rey is, what direction they're going to finish off this movie in, and it just didn't work for me. And on top of it, the criminal sin that they did in this movie. Okay, if you're going to make a bad movie to end a bad trilogy, at least just keep your stuff in your corner. Don't bring the Emperor into this. That's what took this movie all the way to the worst for me. The fact that they they basically ruined what they did with the Return of the Jedi. Return of the Jedi was such an excellent way to end that amazing trilogy. You know, Emperor dies, that's it, that's over, period, books closed. You can't just bring him back just to try and save a crappy trilogy. It's not
Somehow Palpatine returned.
worth it. Don't ruin what the good thing you have by trying to like resonate with the fans. I've been like, oh, here's the Emperor, remember him? Like, everybody liked him, so now he's in our movie, so now you guys are gonna have to like our movie. Like, no, that's not the way it works. And then they come out with this book after saying like, oh, it was just a clone, we were just kidding. Like, no, you can't do that. Like, it just you just ruined it. You can't ruin it. Overall, this movie was just bad. Like, Adam Driver, I thought like his like character arc was still great. Honestly, that's like the one redeeming factor for that whole trilogy. I really liked Adam Driver. I really like what they did with Kylo Ren. But everything else about this movie is awful in my opinion. It's just not. It just doesn't work for me, and the whole trilogy just doesn't work for me. This is one of my second least favorite Star Wars movie, and it's gonna be in the same realm as Attack of the Clones. I really didn't like that movie. All right, and finally, the last one on the list, Episode 5, Empire Strikes Back. Hands down, period. You already knew I was going to say it. This is the best Star Wars movie that they have released. Everything about this movie is fantastic. You start off, bang, you're in Hoth. Action sequence. It's enjoyable. You know, we get to see all the characters that we saw from the first Star Wars movie. You know, new clothing and like new feel to them. Like you can feel like they, because of the character development in A New Hope, you really know these characters well and you care about what's going to happen to these characters. And the pacing is fantastic. Everything that happened on Hoth was great. And then you find out that Luke has to go to Dagobah to train from this guy named Yoda, and that's super interesting, and everything that happens on Dagobah is great. And then Han Solo and the rest of the gang like are traveling the Millennium Falcon, like they can't jump to light speed because like the Millennium Falcon's broken, so you have that whole dilemma. But then you also have this like love romance conflict between Leia and Han, which just totally works so well. It's not forced at all. The dialogue is fantastic, and then they all end up meeting on Bespin. We get to meet Lando. Everything that happened on Bespin is fantastic, and it all leads up to the single best scene in the entire Star Wars universe, which is the conflict between Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader. You get
The Force is with you, young Skywalker. But you are not a Jedi yet.
This unbelievable plot twist where you find out Darth Vader is Luke's father. Everything about it works. There's no boring parts in this entire movie. The pacing is fantastic. The character development is unreal. The acting is superb. Everything about this movie is great. This is my favorite Star Wars movie for sure. All right, and that's going to wrap it up. These are my thoughts and opinions ranking all of the Star Wars movies. Again, these are only my thoughts and opinions. Obviously, a lot of people are going to disagree with where I ranked some of these videos. Feel free to let me know in the comment section down below. What are your favorite Star Wars movies? Rank your Star Wars movies. Let me know. This is 6 Scale Economist, and we'll see you in the next video.